All right, talk to me, Anna. We'll see how well I can hear you.
I am talking at you, and I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can see your smiling face.
Good.
Can you hear me on your computer?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm going to get off the phone call.
Okay, well, just a second. I'm going to turn off my video here.
All right, you got 1 minute. See you when you get back in.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
God bless, Anna.
Somebody sweet, somebody who just wants.
Why? What? Did I do something wrong?
No, just God bless you for being able to improvise.
I have no choice in the matter, do I? We are on air.
I can hear you clearly.
And how is everybody else doing? Are we live streaming now, or?
Yes, we are. We can all hear you, but now we can see you.
Good. Well, I'm here doing my thing. What a day. It's been a real roller coaster since way early this morning. It's all going in our favor. It's all going our way. So we have nothing to complain about. I think that people have been following along with the articles and keeping up with the news know that we've been in kind of a dogfight of sorts with the British Crown. This should be no surprise to anyone because it's been a long problem that we've been addressing throughout our existence, actually, as an organization. And we're getting down now to the ultimate meaning of what this has been all about and how these commercial interests have disserved the people they're under contract to protect in good faith, and how they have preyed upon the living people and created a genocide on paper. And when that genocide on paper began to fall apart for them because it was discovered and we began the process of holding them accountable for their actions, they tried an actual genocide in the form of the whole COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a situation that is very deplorable and very sad. It's the consequence of 150 years of fraud. And now I'm sorry it's coming down to all this, but it's an inexorable process once it begins, because once the nature of the fraud and the nature of the crimes against humanity become clear, there's a whole sort of machinery that kicks into gear. And that is what's happening now, is that inexorable machinery that the ratchet hits the wheel kind of machinery is taking place. And unfortunately, there are a great many people who have gotten caught up in this fraud. I mean, there's nothing else that you can call it. They've gotten caught up in this fraud, and they've become accomplices to it. And now they're afraid of the consequences and what this is going to mean for them, for their businesses, for their families. And it's a human tragedy that was fueled by greed and fear and a great drama unfolding behind the curtain. I have been harmed by this, and millions more people have been harmed by this, but we need to remember that many of the people are totally ignorant. They had no idea that they were doing anything wrong. And so in those instances, it is important that we retain our own decency and our own mercy, our own good character, so that we do not then commit injustice and crime against people who really, truly are innocent of any intention of doing wrong. They did not mean to harm us. They did not think they were in the, they did not think they were doing anything that was unlawful or illegal or immoral, even though they were. So I'll just kind of put a hand up and say, be prepared to be merciful and avoid making the mistake that people too often make, which is to create a new injustice while they're trying to answer an old injustice. That little saying that you heard as a child, that two wrongs don't make a right, is exactly true. And I often reflect that the entire lesson of Jesus on the cross is telling us that responding in kind does not change anything. It just creates more of whatever it was that was horrible in the first place. That in order to conquer evil, you have to conquer it with good. And to overcome violence, you have to overcome it with peace. Now, this doesn't really make much sense to our human psychology because we do not understand the size of the game board that we're playing on. We don't understand that we're immortal beings. We are only looking at this one little life and this one little circumstance. And in fact, the game board is a lot bigger than that. And the importance of what we do and what we say, that's also hidden from us. We have no idea how important and how powerful our voices are. We have no idea how important and how powerful our words are. And so we're sort of loose cannons out there, rampaging around, making assumptions that are reasonable from the perspective that we have, from what we can see, but which in a bigger sense and from a larger perspective isn't really what we would want to do if we could see the whole game board. So I'm just kind of trying to hold back impulses toward vengeance, because the vengeance that is due is built and predicated on information that we don't have. We have to depend on higher powers to discern the absolute truth in any of these situations. We are not competent We don't know how much a person really knew at any one given moment. We don't know what pressures and what assumptions they were acting with. So, as we go forward, choose the high ground, choose mercy, choose to be a better person, choose to show up with your best self. And it's better to err on the side of mercy than to make a mistake on the side of judgment. This week we had a conversation, and there were several discussions going on about the search for longevity. And of course, a lot of these cabal corporations have been investing very heavily for a long time in finding the secret of anti-aging and how to prolong life and quality of life. And this has been going on full tilt for far longer than the public might imagine. And they have reached a point where, yes, they can significantly prolong life and quality of life if the technology and if the science is shared. People can look forward to living much longer and having better quality of life while they live. So this has been a big focus for decades. And an interviewer was asking Elon Musk why he hadn't invested, like all the other billionaire, trillionaire types, in longevity science. And his answer was rather measured and evasive. But the truth of the matter is that someone like Elon Musk already knows at a certain level that he is immortal. So why spend a lot of money and effort chasing after something that you already have? And the further truth of the matter, though he would probably never say it, just out of kindness and sensitivity, he would probably never actually say this, but I will, is that we get tired of being who we are. Yes, we love our families and we love the lives we've built for the most part. But there comes a time when we're tired of being Elon Musk. We're tired of being Anna Maria Reisinger. We're tired of being Donald John Trump. And, whatever our name and our physical person and everything is, everything that we've experienced in this lifetime and how that has shaped us and what we have learned and experienced, it's all wonderful, but at a certain point, you're just plain tired of being that person. And so the truth is that we wouldn't desire to be immortal in these bodies. We, given a flat out choice of, being healthy and being in this body forever and ever, we would never choose that. We would never knowingly choose that because we just get to a point where it's time to go on, time to be someone else, time to spin the wheel and explore other dimensions and other things and be other personas, have a different face, a different voice. And that's something that I think has not been in our consciousness And it has not been in the way that we look at death, simply because we've been taught that we're merely mortal and that one life is all we have, and that the disposition of our mortal soul is dependent on what we do here and now, and all these other things that have served to truncate our vision and scare us and make us compliant and obedient to, supposed authorities standing over us and dictating our behavior and beliefs. And so I just want to let you all know that it's basically a hogwash. We do have an immortal soul. That part is true. We also have a spirit. And we have our terrestrial incarnate body and person. So I'm saying all this so that maybe you can have, number one, more comfort with respect to the loss of loved ones, to realize that they are not dead in the sense that we think of them as being gone and beyond reach forever and all that sort of thing. And to know yourself, to face your own life and possible, whatever comes up, to face your own destiny in this life with more courage, because this isn't all there is. You really are immortal already. And being immortal, you would not want to be trapped in this same physical body forever anyway. So I'm just saying this to you. I'm sure some of it's going to go ping-ponging off like those little steel ball bearings in a pinball machine, they hit the bumper and it goes boop. But I'm saying it anyway, and for those of you who are actually hearing this and letting it sink in, it will be a comfort always to be sure and to know that, yeah, you are immortal. So these are kind of heavy topics, all of them. The judgment has come down from on high that, yes, we are right. All the stuff that we have brought forward is true. The mismanagement, the crimes against humanity, the genocide on paper, all of it, it's all done. It's all decided. It's been decided for a couple of weeks now. And it's all, there's one basic big decision, and then there are a whole bunch of little decisions that come down, sort of subsidiary decisions that come down. And so the hard part, the real work, the evidence and the arguments and everything have already been done. And it's just a matter now of kind of kicking back and letting the wheels turn and the processes process until we are totally vindicated and everything is settled. Now, I want to remind everybody of something else that I've spoken on numerous occasions. I've observed to you that we humans are not particularly good at answering how something is going to get done, although we scrap around with that and do our best. We're not particularly good at why something should be done. We often miss the major points. Sometimes we're quite unable to figure out where something should be done or who should do it. But there is one thing that we are really, really good at. If we sit down and we think about it, we can always determine what we want. We can always feel that in our hearts, just like a homing beacon. What is it that we really truly want? If we ask ourselves that question, we will find the answer. And that's our great value in all of this, is that we can determine what. What is it? What is the goal? What is the vision? What kind of world do we want to live in? That's our expertise. That's our talent. That's what we can do really well. And so what we need to contribute to all of this is what? We need to answer the question, what? And everybody, each in their own way, each in the private environs of your own home and your own life, you need to think about what you want. What do you want for yourself? What do you want for your families? What do you want for your communities, your states, your country, your entire world? We're the only ones that can answer that. There are many, many forces and powers, organizations that can answer all the other questions. But we're the ones that need to answer what. So if you are listening to me and thinking about this, spend some time thinking about what you want. Try to get as clear a picture of that in your mind as you possibly can. Now, if you want the oceans to be clean, imagine clean oceans. Feel clean oceans. Smell fresh, the smell of fresh salt spray. Take that into your heart, into your mind, into your vision. If you want clean land, if you want a completely different solid waste management system that does not involve burying landfills and watching them rot over the next several centuries. Imagine a system where the components are just degraded to their mineral and atomic structures and do not become pollution on the land and soil. We can imagine these things, and as we imagine them, they take on a reality that we're quite unaware of, but which exists. They become thought forms. And the more energy that we can concentrate into that thought, the more we drag it into reality. So this is our way of signaling what we want. And so spend some time really thinking about what you individually want, and even discuss it with your family, with your assembly. Really truly get down to the heart of it, of what do we want? What kind of world do we want to see? And then imagine that. Because in imagining it, in feeling it, we do bring it into reality. My mother observed to me many years ago that there's a time delay between cause and effect. So we don't always see the effect of our actions or our words, or our thought feelings, our thought forms. We just off the cuff express whatever, and then we're surprised when down the road something else shows up and we don't realize that it's the result of what we thought or felt or said at some prior time. So becoming more sensitive to how this actually works is a benefit not only to us individually, but it's a big plus culturally and nationally and internationally in all ways, just to become more aware of how powerful we are and how we're kind of bulls in the china shop, misdirecting things in ways that we don't notice. You know, like when you fly off the handle and you say, "Oh, you fool." It's not even really that much of an insult, but it is. It is having its effect. And we don't know what that effect is. We don't notice. We don't make the connection because there's a delay in time between the cause and the effect. But maybe 5 years down the track, that child that we called a fool will still be sitting there with that echoing in their ears, and it will affect some decision they make that is harmful to them or harmful to us. So we just have to become much more aware of how important our words, our thoughts, and our feelings really are, and learn to redirect those elements of our empowerments to create good things, to create the things we really want, instead of just kind of rattling around and not paying attention to our thoughts and not paying attention to our words or our feelings. So I'll give you a heads up about all of that too. I think that we're going to come out fine with everything that we've set up with the banking system. I think the Blue Dot banking system will work out. I think that we will get what we need in terms of banks that can serve living people and lawful persons. The fate of corporations in general is somewhat up in the air. The corporations that remain, if they do remain at all as part of our lives on Earth, will be much better regulated. They will be much more, well, first of all, those that create corporations will be much more responsible for their direction. And they will, it won't be just regulation. It will be actually oversight applied to each corporation to make sure that what they're doing is lawful and beneficial for humanity. I'm feeling pretty good about our international position. Many governments are recognizing our government. Many people worldwide, now over 180 nations, are organizing their lawful government assemblies, even if they haven't had lawful government assemblies in the past, even if they haven't had a lawful government assembly in many years. They are all perking up and doing their jobs. So I'm thrilled to see that. We're getting a lot of support from other lawful governments around the world. And we're getting a lot of response from the Blue Dot banks, the ones that I call Blue Dot banks in my little model that I created, meaning the actual private bullion banks and asset-backed banks and banks that are set up to serve the needs of living people. They're suddenly all popping up on the radar screen and saying, yes! So they're rushing toward us. And a lot of these banks are very heavy hitters that have a lot of assets. So that's all going very well. The Blue Dot Bank, or rather I call it the Blue Dot Bank network, or the bilateral bank network, is set up and it's rolling forward. We have a lot of new members that want to join us by bank treaty and begin serving the public. So that's a wonderful thing. We are looking at a situation with the British Crown that is very, very unfortunate, but it is inevitable. And the Roman municipal corporations too. It's hard to understand how just nothing but sheer greed and selfishness could devolve into the situation that we've had to deal with, but it did. And now the unraveling of these gigantic monopoly interests will be difficult, and it will have to go step by step. It cannot happen. Part of it can happen overnight. Part of it can be but part of it will require considerably longer and more effort and more education. Especially to retrain the members of the bar associations in other forms of law, and for these men and women to understand what they were doing wrong, and for us to revisit a lot of the history of each country and get everybody back on a solid basis. Because I can tell you that there are a lot of countries out there that don't really know their own history anymore. And they're having to delve it out. And there are a lot of countries that never actually had a land jurisdiction government, ever. They just never had a land jurisdiction government. They were never a sovereign government to begin with. And so they lack the land and soil components. And there are no institutions that they can hearken back to like we can, that they can use as the basis of running their land and soil jurisdiction. So these countries are having to kind of not recreate the wheel, but create the wheel for the first time. And they need a lot of help, and they need a lot of hand-holding, and there's a lot of research that is going into reestablishing the basis of a sovereign government in places like South Africa and places like Canada, where essentially they never had an independent land jurisdiction sovereign government. Now, we can help, but we could not possibly do all of the work or have access to all of the archives and the information that all these different countries need. So it's going to be a tough slog for a while everybody goes through the confusion and makes the effort to find their roots and find their history and make new history, frankly. So some of these things are going to take a while. But on the all, I think we're doing all right. I'm very encouraged by what I see. I see a lot of people who are actually thinking deeply, really getting down to the heart of the matter, and working with really wonderful creativity and with a kind of faithfulness to the cause that is heartwarming. Over the 4th of July, I got dozens and dozens of well wishes from all over the world. We got all sorts of pictures of Americans out doing what Americans do on the 4th of July, and lots of images of our peace flag flying, and our Missouri Assembly won first place in a
237 emails that you received.
yeah, just it was quite a day of photographs and good wishes and all sorts of things going on that were very very happy and very creative, and just a sampling of the progress that we're all making toward better days ahead. So I think that all things taken into consideration, as Jim would say, the 5th of July has come and we're back with our noses to the grindstone. But by all measures, we're making progress, and a lot of creativity and energy and joy is being found by those that are taking up the work and making it possible for this entire giddy up to move forward. So, fellas, guys and gals, munchkins, mouseketeers, and all the rest, I guess I'm ready to face the first question.
Okay, first question. I need to file bankruptcy, but don't know if it's possible since I'm status corrected. I'm getting 35 phone calls a day from debt collectors, medical, school, credit cards, garnishments, etc. Our family of four is trying to survive on $75 a month after the bills are paid. Since there's no timeline on GFG funding, how would an ASN go about filing bankruptcy?
Well, remember that thing, that corporation that has been attached to you is the one that would have to file for bankruptcy, not you, it. Okay? And it is still eligible for bankruptcy. So you would be filing bankruptcy for the corporation, and it would be no different than any other bankruptcy that they routinely handle. You'd have to go through what's called credit counseling. Basically, they assign an advisor to you, and the advisor looks at the information they give you concerning what the debts are, how much the debts are, whether or not these can be consolidated into some kind of payment plan, blah, 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 blah. And so they have an expert look at your situation. And if they can't come up with something that will work to back off all these bill collectors and get things down to a manageable rate of payment, they will recommend bankruptcy, and they'll give you some forms that you fill out. And then you go to the court, and the court becomes the trustee of the corporation. And they sort out the assets of the corporation versus the debts of the corporation. They have a tiered system of which they have sort of a pecking order that's all pre-established as to what debts are most important versus least important, those that have the higher priority. And so they pay off those debts that can be prioritized and you know, that are important in this listing. And then they discharge all the other debts. And you walk out of there with just a certain bare minimum of the assets reapportioned to the corporation, which is usually whatever interest the corporation has as a tenant in your house property. Last time I looked, you got to keep one car. And they just basically leave you with a very basic minimal grub stake and asset interest in things so that you don't lose occupancy of your house. You're not left without basic transportation, and you have some minimal amount of money left. I think the last time I looked, it was $8,000. It may be more now. But anyway, that's how that works. And then all of the bill collectors have to back off and leave you alone, which is a blessing if you've been harassed by them. Now, what should happen in a fair, just, and rational world is that you would get to keep everything that you have without any kind of problem, and it would all just be indemnified. But until all this stuff gets straightened out and your status as an American is fully recognized, or I should say as a Wisconsinite, a Tennessean, or whatever, until the nation state status is fully recognized and officially recognized by everybody, you might not be able to wait that long to get things solidified and get proper process out of these yahoos. So if you do feel that you're at that point and you just absolutely can't put up with it anymore, and you need that break space of a bankruptcy, well, go ahead and bankrupt that corporation. As for, when you can expect some resolution on the side of getting the asset-backed currencies and everything settled, like I say, the big issues were settled 2 weeks ago. And all these other things are just kind of going downhill, this. And it will not take that much longer. We've just had a few things that have kind of reared their ugly heads at the last moment that we had to stop and deal with. But I think that we don't have that much longer to wait. I hope that answered the question.
Very thorough. It answered it for me. Okay, next question. You recently said again, get out of the stock market. What would you say are the best options, real gold or silver, or annuities, real property, businesses you personally know? Please discuss and please explain to us what we can do outside of that.
Well, historically, silver offers the best option because silver is usually 65% of the value of gold in any trading market. And you can see that silver has never gotten close to 65% of the trading market value of gold. So, there's a lot of bizarre stuff that goes on with the precious metals markets, because the total amount of gold and silver is vastly more than anything that was historically reported by the LIBOR organizations and the London trading markets. But at the end of the day, when it all settles out, when it's all on the table, historically, under those three conditions where nobody's hiding anything or hoarding anything, silver always comes out and trades somewhere around 65% of the value of gold. And that difference between 65% of gold and whatever silver is selling for now is potential profit. Okay, so that's why silver is widely regarded as the best long-term precious metals investment. You can invest in like small businesses. If you see a small business in your community, it's always worth asking if if they are taking on any investors. There are some organizations that I'm aware of now where small businesses, unincorporated businesses have started up where they've been supported by private investment, and that's worked out very well for the investors as well as the business owners. So those are some decent opportunities right there. I would not try to buy any quote unquote real estate because, as the name indicates, real means royal. Okay, royal estate. This means that all this land has been thrown into a British national trust for presumed British subjects who don't exist. And as a result, the whole system is wonky. What do you really own when you own a real estate title to something that isn't real? Okay, so this is a problem. This is why I suggest everybody get a meets and bounds survey on their property and get it recorded, because these titles and these land descriptions are not going to hold water. They will stand as a description of your property, but what you need a physical survey of your property. And you're either going to have to do that physical survey now or later and get it recorded so that we can actually know what we're talking about. And so I certainly wouldn't buy any phony real estate titles or land descriptions, municipal land descriptions at this point. Because
I got some seafront property in Arizona for you.
Right. And I'm quit claim a beautiful beachfront property in Florida that only exists 6 months of the year. There's a lot of swindles out there, and the title system and the municipal land description system are about to become recognized as a form of swindle, because they created these giant land trusts claiming the same property. For example, you've got a British title and a municipal land description applied to the same property, on top of which you have your claim to it, which is a meets and bounds survey, an actual physical survey, and it's a mess. It's going to be a mess. It's one of the things that has to be basically ironed out. But anyway, so I wouldn't invest in real estate of any kind at this point. We're kind of limited in the things that we can invest in, but we can certainly invest in ourselves. We can invest in our education. We can invest in our health. We can invest in our hobbies and our families and things that we need to get done, like maintenance on our homes. All these things are to the good. They're all investments. And those are the kinds of investments I would feel most safe about making right now.
Okie dokie. Next question. Please provide more clarity regarding the known role and responsibility between the Office of the Provost Marshal and the Secretary of State office, as to which office actually validates state public elections, and that it is not and has never been the function of the Provost Marshal's office, but the function of the Secretary of State. The State Secretary of State, sorry.
It's actually, at this point, there's nobody who can certify our state elections. Our state elections stand above all of the above offices, and they are all foreign offices, so they have nothing to say about certifying or validating our state elections, except in the kind of euphemistic sense of them looking at our process and saying, oh yeah, that's fair. They're making a judgment in their own minds about whether or not we're conducting proper elections. But it doesn't count for anything because our elections don't have anything to do with them. They're not their elections. You see, it's just kind of an evaluation of whether or not we've got a good process in place that they could undertake as observers. Okay, it's not like they can come in and put a stamp of approval on anything, because the employees don't get to approve what the employers do. So that's how that works. The office of the provost marshal is basically military police. Okay. And the way that they got put in the middle between the civilians and the military occupational forces after the Civil War is pretty straightforward. We had military units out confiscating property and goods from mostly the southern states and the southern people, under the presumption that they were all rebels and they all owed war reparations, which turns out not to be true. But anyway, you had all these cavalry units and military infantry units and troops, and they were basically just going through the country, and whatever they could find, they were filching, they were confiscating it. And, so they were taking food from the southern plantations and using it for their own use and their own animals. And they were going into southern homes and using them as bases of operation and as shelter for their troops and everything else. They were just basically acting as a hostile occupation force on our own land and soil. And they were doing this under the false presumption that this was an actual war, but in fact it was a mercenary conflict and they didn't have any right to do any of this. The actual states of the Union weren't even involved in their quote-unquote war. So they basically were out, again, ignorantly making presumptions and assumptions about the situation. And they had a great deal of pushback in terms of the looting that was going on by the military in the wake of the Civil War. And the provost marshals and the military police were put in the middle of this and became the office, the interface for the civilians who were being looted to come and make complaints and secure protection. So what the provost marshal would do is that the civilians would come and say, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so came through here and stole my horses, my wagon, and 85 bushels a week. Okay, whatever. And then the provost marshal would have to look at it and go, oh, well, you're a non-combatant and they had no right to do this, and therefore we'll go round them up and get your horses and your wagon and your stuff and get it back to you. So that's the kind of role, and that's how the provost marshal got involved, and that's how their office was working. It was actually disciplining the military and keeping the military from making illegal confiscations from civilians. And in a way, that's still what their duty is that they are military police and they're supposed to be keeping the military controlled and disciplined and within the public law. So they're military police. Okay, and that's how the relationship got started, and that's basically their role in terms of civilian support goes. We are going through an extensive research of the Provost Marshal's office, going back all the way to 1865 and through to the present day. And it's kind of odd because we have one group that's researching it from the present day, going backward, and another group that's researching it from 1865 onward. So at some point here, we're all going to meet in the middle, and we'll have the complete, continuous history fleshed out, and we will know for certain what the overall responsibility of the provost marshal is in the midst of this situation where we have municipal officers looting the people on behalf of the military occupiers. That's the other twist in the situation. If it were just the military, the mercenary forces going out and looting the civilians, the provost marshal's office would be the obvious point of contact, because there's still military or quasi-military police. The problem is that they've worked out an agreement with the Roman municipal corporations, and so the actual ones doing the looting and the illegal confiscations and the illegal evictions are all municipal employees. They're municipal corporation officers. They're civilian corporation employees that are doing the looting for the mercenary corporation employees. And then they're all getting back together and splitting the goods 60-40. So in this situation, it's a matter of making that connection for the British Crown Corporation affiliates and saying, hey, you're responsible for what your employees do in your name, and you are responsible for not looting civilians. It's just that one extra step in there to make the connection that the municipal government is hired by the territorial government to do the looting. But the territorial government is still responsible for the looting because they're the ones that are making the claims that the municipal employees are acting upon. I hope that made sense.
Okay, next question. Does MOCEE program apply worldwide, or is it restricted to the U.S.?
As far as I know, it's only applicable here in the United States. It was a specific remedy that was developed in the 1930s for a debt swap program that never actually happened because the guilty parties never actually set it up and made it available to the public. I mean, it still works to some extent, but it's anybody's guess of whether or not it will work or how long it will take. We've just had a bunch of mortgages come in and the claims were made 8 years ago. So.
Okay, next question. Is there any reason not to resubmit unsettled Sign in America MOCEE claims submitted 7 years ago?
Absolutely not. Go for it. Absolutely. Bring forward your claims and keep, pounding on doors and saying, because you are owed that. And, right now I'm sure they're out of pocket and kind of stumbling around and feeling like they don't know which pocket to take anything out of anymore, because all all these corporations are trying to get their fat out of the fire, right? And a lot of them are out of pocket because they haven't been able to collect on phony debts. And so, as a result, they're very protective of their money, and they're very hungry. And so they're trying to avoid anything. And really, if they were aware of their situation, they would jump on the chance to give everybody their mutual offset credit exchange exemptions and to swap debts, because when they swap debts, their national debt goes down. The reason that their national debt got so out of control in the first place is that they never gave the remedy to the people. Because if people had known and had an accessible way to perform a debt swap, they would have been taking advantage of this all along. They would have been debt swapping out mortgages. They would have been debt swapping out utility taxes. They would have been debt swapping out property taxes. And the national debt of our employees would have gone way down, which would have given them a higher credit ceiling, and it would have given them better credit all around. So it would have been an advantage for them, but they just were too boneheaded and didn't realize that they were stepping on their own proverbial. Anyway, right now a debt swap does nothing but reduce their national debt, and a lot of their national debt is just bogus anyhow, because it was already paid off many times by the American people providing services and actual goods in exchange for Federal Reserve notes. So it's confusion. It's mass confusion out there. And in the economics of this, yeah, debt swaps are still good. Debt swaps still help everybody concerned, but they never actually set up a program to be able to do the debt swaps. They just sort of, on a profitable basis, just, one would come in and someone would have the sense to actually do it, to actually process the paperwork or investigate it enough to be able to process the paperwork. And the U.S. Secretary of State never actually provided a program with any step-by-step instruction or forms for people to fill out to accomplish this.
Okay, next question. When is district courts over? I have a victimless crime.
Right. All these district courts really have no business being here and never did. As the name implies, they are District of Columbia courts that are operating outside their jurisdiction. And they should never have been allowed into the states of the Union. I'm sure they wouldn't have been allowed into the states of the Union, except that they pulled this whole Civil War era fraud scheme against their employers and tried to justify bringing the district courts into the states because the state courts were not operating sufficiently after 4 years, 5 years of war, or shall I say mercenary conflict. So they justified their presence in the states by saying the state courts were not up and running and not sufficient to deal with the amount of craziness that was happening, and therefore they were bringing the district courts in as a emergency measure, and they did it under quote-unquote emergency powers, which of course they were never granted. There's no authorization anywhere of emergency powers. But anyway, that's what they claimed. And so the district courts were never intended to be anywhere but the District of Columbia, and that's still the way it is. They should still be in the District of Columbia. And people don't think about this, but they started out as military districts, and then they just did a little sleight of hand, a little, verbal magic, and changed it to judicial districts, which really don't exist. There's been so much fraud and so much misrepresentation and so much deliberate, deliberate attempts to bamboozle the public and make people think one thing when it was another, and all this kind of fraudulent shyster business going on that, whether they call it a military district or a judicial district, it's a foreign district that doesn't belong in our states of the Union. Never did. So, and we've got two varieties. We've got both territorial district courts, which are the hidden military districts. And then we've got the municipal district courts, which are the judicial districts. Couldn't make this stuff up, folks. If I tried, I couldn't make it up. But neither one of them belong here. Neither one of them have any business addressing us. They should all be located in the District of Columbia. And instead, what might be permissible would be territorial courts that are here to address military personnel, or municipal courts that are here to address federal civil servants, federal civil service employees, or program directors, and that sort of thing. They could get away with that. But the kind of sweeping jurisdiction that they have assumed over their employers, the American people, and the way that they have misrepresented themselves and misrepresented the defendants in these courts is criminal. And there's no authority for it. They have absolutely no basis of authority to do it. So, my complaint to the powers that be is, what in the hell are these district courts doing here? And nobody has an answer. It got started in the wake of the Civil War, and it just kind of took on a life of its own, and they made a lot of money confiscating stuff illegally and under false pretenses, and that encouraged them, and they got away with it some more, and some more years went by, and they continued to get away with illegal confiscation of civilian assets, and they were divvying things up, and they were getting their cut, and they were using this to fund these courts, and they just continued on doing it because nobody was the wiser. Well, now we're the wiser. So what in the hell are they doing here? And where's their basis of authority? And who the hell are they? So, that sort of thing is being pumped up the line to the generals and to the Pope and to the magistrates and to the majestic authorities above them. And, it's going straight to the top now because the criminality of it is so obvious. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And the complaint has been substantiated, and the harm to living people has been substantiated. So this is another one of those things that's kind of bumping down the track with, you have all these sort of corollary judgments that have to be made after having verified the fraud and having verified the fact that there was no civil war and therefore no rationale for collecting war reparations. And, once you've started to really rip that one, the rest of it all falls. It all goes like dominoes. And it's just a matter of time until it reaches the district court issues that actually started in May of 1865. So that one was a very early thing that happened almost immediately. And the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
Okay, next question. You had said in the past to post a notice sign at the front door of your establishment. Reserved the rights not to serve any federal employees or its dependents, would waive any obligation of state agencies and its franchise codes, policy, statutes, etc. Could you please clarify on that?
No, that's not what I recommended at all. I recommended a little statement saying that federal employees and citizens receive service at their own risk. It's just a disclaimer, that you're letting them know that you're not licensed by their government. You don't have any regulatory nod from their government. And if they want to receive services from you, or they want to buy goods from you, they're doing it on their own reconnaissance. They're doing it of their own free will, not as U.S. citizens. And that works. It works perfectly well. See, medical doctors are not licensed in this country by this government. We have physicians. They are occupied in providing healthcare services as people work in an occupation of common right, okay? But the federal corporation, the United States of America, Inc., licenses medical doctors to work in hospitals that receive military funding and that serve federal employees. So in order to serve federal employees, you have to be a medical doctor. In order to prescribe medicine for federal employees, you have to be a medical doctor. But say that you're you have your own clinic, and say that you're a person who has gone to school and done your internship and everything, and you decide that you want to go into a private practice as a physician. You can still do that. And what you do is you're screening your clients or your customers as they come through the door, and you have a little form, an intake form, a customer sheet, if you will, with their name, address, all that kind of stuff, their medical history, blah, blah, blah. And you add one more little space to it that says, are you a federal employee or dependent? And if they're a federal employee or dependent, you get them to sign a little waiver that says they agree to accept service from your business or from you, or to buy goods. And they just sign off on that. So they're basically waiving any protection of the license or requirement that a person providing service to them is licensed by the corporation. And yeah, you can still do that. The corporations, I should say, have been trying to prevent that, but they can't. And there are a lot of different aspects of this that become a fertile breeding ground for discussions. But when you post that kind of a disclaimer and make it everybody's own responsibility for who they buy from and whether or not you're licensed and all that stuff, then that just puts the responsibility back on the individual as to whether they're going to trust you as their medical provider or not. Same thing with, the courts. The bar associations have the courts all bungled up and monopolized. But the practice of law is an occupation of common right. So you can work as a counselor of law, and it's just up to your clientele whether they're willing to accept that and realize that, no, you don't have a bar license or guild card or anything else that they're selling today. You just have, your own knowledge of the law. You've read the law, you know the law, and you can speak to the law. And if that's true and the person is willing to hire you, then you can act as their counselor of law and you can sit right beside them and guide them through the process. A lot of bar attorneys who are leaving the bar associations and who can no longer practice directly through these courts, these foreign courts, are choosing to operate as unlicensed counselors of law. And they just give their clients basically a waiver and, say, they just up front tell them, well, okay, I've got my Juris Doctorate and I was a bar association member for X number of years, but I became aware of things that were done that were not proper. And I left the bar association because of it. And so now I work as a counselor of law and, I'm not allowed to represent you in court because under actual public law, you are not deemed an incompetent. You are deemed competent to represent yourself as to the facts of whatever it is being brought before the court. So what I can do is I can sit beside you and I can tell you what the process and the procedures and what the meaning of the question is being asked and that sort of thing. But I'm not going to stand there and let's put it this way, represent you. Okay? So in all these cases where these various professional licenses have been used to monopolize what should be public services, you can use a disclaimer and a waiver to make it possible for those people who are actually federal civil servants or military personnel to receive services or goods from you.
Okay, next question. Can you elaborate on all the different Congresses that are involved in our American government? Our government, not the de facto Congress.
3. There are 3 of our Congresses and there are 3 of their Congresses. And that's because the delegated rights are just a subset of a much larger group of rights and enumerated powers that belong to the states. So there are basically 6 Congresses. I know that's kind of mind-blowing. And the names are very confusing. Because they're all operating under different names. And 2 of them haven't operated since the 1860s. And two of them have hardly ever operated since the 1860s. In addition to that, they still exist. At least they have the Congress of the several states assembled. You could say that we have operated as a Congress when we have taken roll call votes of all the states' assemblies, because that is a Congress of the several states assembled. But those occasions in the past 160 years have been very rare. So all of our attention is funneled toward the federal Congresses and not toward our own Congresses. And we are now in a process that will lead in a very inexorable fashion again toward a restoration of our Continental Congress. And the Continental Congress is the Congress associated with the Union states, the states that are the composites of all the counties and all the living people. And there will also be a Congress of the states of the Union, the Federation Congress. And each one of these has their own jurisdiction, they have their own constituents, they have their own purposes, they have their own subject matter. And it's really fascinating because you've got the United States, capital THE, United States, I should say capital T, small h, small e, upper lowercase, the United States Congress, right? And that's the Union States Congress, otherwise known as the Continental Congress. Then you have the Congress of the United States of America, the Federation Congress, with, the proper case and style. And then you've got the Congress of the States of America. Those three names, United States of America, and States of America, have been with our government from the very beginning. And they've come to mean different things over time. We've had the situation of two separate things operating under the same name at the same time, which became very confusing and led to the fraud against us. But when they did this, it actually had kind of there was a rationale to why they did the things they did at the time. And, I don't know that we would have done it any different. It just became very confusing, especially to the general public looking in without all the history in back of them. So we have six Congresses total, 3 American Congresses, 3 federal Congresses, and one of the American Congresses went out of business, so to speak, in 1861, was adjourned sine die with no date to come back into session. And one of them, the Federal Republic Congress, went into dormancy along with the Constitution that was set up to create the Federal Republic. In 1861, it kind of muddled along for another 10 years, and then because nobody had been honest about what was going on, the American people were never told what was actually happening. So of course they didn't get organized to give direction or take other action. And so the Federal Republic, doing business as the States of America, or under the States of America, was basically seized upon by the British territorial subcontractors, and all those assets were stolen. There's no better word for it than stolen. They were purloined. They were taken under false pretenses. They were deliberately removed and made into British assets instead of American assets, and were left under the control of the British Territorial Corporation. That's just the way it went, folks. Not that it was legal, not that it was lawful, not that it was moral. It was just a rather vicious con game.
Okay, next question. I divorced a few months ago from an American. I'm Puerto Rican. Even though we're a territory of the U.S. under corporation, will that affect my wanting to change my status? How is Puerto Rico being treated now and or after the change, please? Thank you.
Well, Puerto Rico is what is called an insular state. Insular to what? To the corporation called the United States, or so it has come to be known. Anyway, in technical fact, Puerto Rico is a British territorial Commonwealth nation. I bet you didn't know that. Most people don't. But yeah, Puerto Rico's a British Commonwealth, and it's merely a possession of the United States Incorporated, and one of those states that is insular or domestic with respect to the United States Corporation. And, you know, I could go back through all of the flips and turns and the similar names, deceits, and all the rest of it. But basically, the Brits came in here under conditions of fraud and deceit. They seized upon the Federal Republic assets in 1871, and then Puerto Rico just became one of those assets and became redefined as an insular state, and then realized that they were in a worse position than they had been, and that they're still a territorial, that they're in a territorial state position. And so they decided to retain what they could retain, which was a civilian Commonwealth status instead of a territorial status under British rule, which at least gave them a few more protections as a Commonwealth than they would have had as a territory. So technically, Puerto Rico is a British Commonwealth. And U.S. citizens, U.S. capital C citizens, are the people that inhabit that particular status. Now, if you want to become a state national, small s state, small n national, you would have to choose a particular state of the union you wanted to live in and live there for a year and a day, and then apply, you know, have your utility bills or whatever you could find that would prove that you'd been living in this state for a year and a day, and then apply to that state assembly for membership.
Okay, next question. Kindly ask Anna if we are now having our own NESARA version. I noticed an NESARA logo on the GFG Education homepage. That stands for National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act.
Okay, so they had this thing called the Economic Stabilization Fund. And basically, when they started the greenbacks back during Lincoln, they hit upon a very profitable legalized scam. Okay. And they've run it as far as they possibly could with the petrodollar. So what they did with the petrodollar is they had an agreement with the Arab states that produce the majority of the crude oil at this point, that they would sell crude oil only in exchange for Federal Reserve notes. Okay? And that can't be impugned because the seller has a right to demand whatever he will in payment. They could have demanded rubies, and then everybody would have had to go out and buy rubies, right? And use the rubies in exchange for oil. It's the same kind of right on the borderline coercive manipulation, where okay, I'll only sell you my muffins in exchange for blueberry jam. Okay, so then you have to hunt around and find blueberry jam so that you can exchange it for muffins. Okay, this is the same thing. You can only get crude oil from us if you pay in Federal Reserve notes. Okay, so everybody had to scramble around and literally buy Federal Reserve notes before they could buy oil. Okay, everyone following along here? So here are these paper Federal Reserve notes, these debt notes that are issued by private central banks, by the Federal Reserve banks, right? And so here's the Federal Reserve banks printing these things off at virtually no cost. I mean, 4 cents per bill, and the face value can be anything, right? They're pumping out these Federal Reserve notes, and everybody else on the planet is stuck having to buy these Federal Reserve notes in order to buy oil. So you've got people that are having to spend their national currencies that are asset-backed for this paper fiat scrip in order to buy another actual commodity, oil. So they're having to trade in their Danish kroner and their Irish gold dollars and their German silver marks and all these asset-backed currencies and the bullion supplies attached to them are having to be traded for paper because they need that paper in order to get fuel oil, you know? So the petrodollar was another one of these greenback type scams where if you want the oil, you have to, get our chits. You have to buy our poker chips before you can get oil. And in this process, the perpetrators of all this gained large quantities of every kind of money you can imagine. Large quantities of asset-backed currencies, large quantities of fiat currency. And they rat-holed all this away in what they call the Economic Stabilization Fund. It's basically, they rat-holed away all of these currencies that they received in trade out of that particular situation. And they used it to blackmail all and other national governments because now they had all this stockpile of national currencies. and they could use it to either flood the market with those national currencies and devalue them, or they could continue to buy more of the national currency and distort the value of it even more in the other direction. And they were manipulating all these currencies, and they were stockpiling all these currencies. And the place that they were stockpiling everything was called the Economic Stability Fund. And that's what they're spending now. That's what they're spending down, trying to pretend that that is NESARA, and that this is the restitution that they're making for all of the skullduggery that they did. And they're trying to pretend that this is settlement of the debt that they owe the American people and other people around the world. But actually what they're doing is, they've stolen, essentially they've stolen all these other currencies, and now they're giving the currencies back that belong to somebody else to pay off their debts. It's what they're famous for. Uncle Sam is absolutely famous for using other people's money to pay off his debts. And so is the British king, by the way. But is this right? Does this make sense that they should be able to use other people's ill-gotten assets to pay off debts that they created through fraud? I want you all to think about this. Is this actually paying back, or is it returning stolen goods? In my mind, it's much more like a pawn shop owner who gets caught with hot goods and then has to open up the back room and start unloading this stuff, right? But the danger is that they are going to pretend that this is settlement of their debt to you when really it's not. All they're doing is returning something that they purloined in the first place. It's not really a payment, and it's not really the return of your specific property or asset.
Okay,
Now, you
ready
know,
for the.
I'm sorry that, that's appearing under the global website. It shouldn't be. There should have been discussion about that. There should have been discussion about the acceptance of any kind of such settlement on the part of the Global Family Bank or the Blue Dot Bank system, any of it, because as I just explained, there's more to it than it appears.
Okay, ready for the next question. Can you elaborate on what the misunderstanding between you and Hunter regarding the GFG and what the misunderstanding will affect the release and operations of GFG in America?
Well, it's kind of up in the air as to whether there will be a GFG, because there were, certain provisions and definitions and agreements that were made that Hunter is, he's just off. He's the bank director. He's working under a public charter. But he doesn't seem to understand that. He's been making some moves that just are not correct. And those moves are endangering the entire operation. And if I'm required to pull the charter, I will, which will immediately create a huge problem for him. But while he is in his la-la land doing things that he should not do without a cooperative discussion and a firm understanding of jurisdiction and law that he does not have, he's been off like a loose cannon doing all sorts of things that can't be done with a publicly chartered bank. And I think it's just overall pride and ignorance that keeps him from talking about this to one of the few people that he does know that is qualified to speak to these issues, me. So, yeah, this has been a problem. I've had a couple of talks with him. It's been amiable. We've been able to resolve our differences. But I don't think he really understands the law and jurisdictional issues that he's trampling around on, like a bull in the china shop. I can assure you that he means well. His heart is in the right place. He wants to help the people of the planet. He wants to do the right thing. But like so many other people before him, he's confused. He's doing what I call going back through the revolving door. He's trying to, in the name of peace, love, and understanding, make affiliations with the British Crown corporations. And for numerous reasons, that really cannot be done. We are separately chartered. We are publicly chartered. And this is a different status. So the game for the British Crown is to try to get one of their franchises in a position of controlling the American public chartered bank. And if they could do that, then they would have the ability they would basically enfranchise us by our association with their franchise. And that would completely undermine the entire purpose for chartering the Global Family Bank and all the derivative banks. We'd be right back to being subservient to the British Crown. And that's not why we chartered the Global Family Bank. So this is the discussion that is going on, and this is what is going to have to be resolved. The NESARA money, for example, the way that they have set up the NESARA or NESCRA money or whatever, this is money from the Economic Stability Fund that they're distributing. And the way they have had it set up is that it can only go to federal corporations. You have to be in their foreign status in order to have an account and be able to access this. I'm sorry.
Okay, now the next question. Second Amendment Constitution is for American nationals, yet we have to purchase via private parties our concealed carry permit and our Second Amendment rights, basically. Isn't the U.S. a corporation, our employee? Employees are not telling the employer what to do. Can you explain this?
That's what they've been doing for the last 160 years. And that's what we're here objecting to and saying, no, it doesn't work that way. Hello. Here's your long lost employer.
Okay, next question. I'm a Delawarean. Never knew that was a word. Who is living in Rhode Island. I was told I could change my status with Rhode Island folks from TASA by the DE state coordinator and recording secretary. Is this true? My other question is, will I have an issue keeping my Social Security benefits after becoming a state national?
You will not have any problem getting your Social Security benefits. And yes, you can change to the Rhode Island Assembly if you've been living in Rhode Island for a year and a day.
Okie dokie. Next question. Where is it? There it is. My benefit happens to be survivor's benefits from my deceased ex. Does that make any difference?
No. Think of Social Security as a payment that the corporation owes you for prior service, whether it's your service or your husband's service or your ex's service or whoever that you inherited, whatever source or account that it was originally based on. It's a payment that they owe you, and it's a payment of the same kind that any other big corporation, like, say Exxon has employees who are working in Saudi Arabia, and they're getting a pension benefit as part of their employment. Okay, you get to the point where you're retiring and you decide to come back from Saudi Arabia to the United States, and you have Exxon still owes you your benefit payment. It's part of your package, right? It's money that they owe you. Well, it doesn't matter if you remain in Saudi Arabia or you move to Ireland or you move to the United States or Australia or to wherever the hell you move after you retire. You're a retiree and they owe you that money. It's the same way with Social Security. They're a big corporation, they owe you that money. It's just cut and dried. So no, they can't interfere or, take your Social Security money, because that's money they owe you. And once you're retired, you're free to go wherever you want. You no longer take orders from them. You no longer have to wear their uniform. You no longer have to work 8 hours a day. You no longer have to kowtow to everything they say as a condition of employment, because guess what? You're no longer employed, but they still owe you that money.
Okay, next question. What is the role of the previous land-based presidents that were before George Washington? Why did George Washington take over the role? Was George Washington working for the crown?
I've gone over this story before, but it's worth retelling. Before the Revolution, there were trading companies. One was called the United States Trading Company. The other was called the United States of America Trading Company. Okay? And both of these companies had investors. The United States Trading Company was largely a bunch of American and Dutch and Catholic and French investors. Okay? And the United States of America Trading Company was largely Americans and British investors. So you have these two trading companies. One's largely investors from the European continent, France, Belgium, and then the other one, the United States of America, is British American. What happens when you have the big dust up called the American Revolution? Well, you have the United States Trading Company splitting in half. Their investors split, right? One group is largely European investors who don't support the revolution. The other is American and Dutch and French investors that do support the revolution. This is where you get Lafayette. This is where you get Montesquieu. This is where you get the Spanish families that sided with the revolution. But when it splits, they continue to call themselves the United States Trading Company. So suddenly you have two organizations calling them the United States Trading Company. One that's pro-revolution, one that's anti-revolution. The same thing happens with the United States of America Trading Company. Some investors support the revolution, some don't. They both continue to call themselves the United States of America Trading Company. This is the basis of most of the confusion which was sown throughout the rest of the history of the country. You now have 4 different organizations. You've got 2 names and 2 organizations, each calling themselves by the same name. United States 1, United States 2, United States of America 1, United States of America 2. And it was all based on, whether you supported the revolution or whether you didn't. Well, glory be, against all the odds, 8 years later, here come the American troops, and they are victorious. And so all of a sudden you have the United States number 2 over here that supported the revolution going, yay, we won, and we're standing in line waiting for big contracts from the new government, right? Same thing goes on over here. The United States of America, number 2, the one that supported the revolution, they're going, oh, yay, boy, our guys won. Oh, boy, our investments are going to pay off. All right. What happens to United States 1 that did not support the revolution? And what happens to United States 2, or the United States 1, I'm sorry, that didn't support the revolution? Well, they're looking at some significant losses, but they're still here. What do you do with them? Well, what the founding fathers decided to do was to allow them to stay in this country and to retain their commercial interests. So whether you were for the revolution or against the revolution, you got to stay here and you got to keep your commercial business interests alive. You might have been buffeted more or less, but you came through it. And that was partially a decision that was selfish on the part of the founders, because of course they would have actually suffered from the loss of these other commercial businesses and their trade and their employment and everything else. So these are the people that they hired to provide certain enumerated services.
Okay. One last question. You've got 6 minutes left, boss. What do you think about data centers?
I think quantum just killed them. The quantum technology is such that it's making data centers obsolete before they even get built. You know, you have one quantum computer that can replace 2 gigantic data centers. I mean, it's like back in the day when we used to have these big old Hewlett-Packard mainframes, and they were like the size of buildings. Everybody remember that? Well, that's the situation with the data centers. They have all these huge data banks and these gigantic computers and machines and whatnot, and they take up all this space and take all this energy, and they're slow and clunky by comparison. And you have one quantum computer the size of a room instead of the sprawling complex the size of 10 football fields. And it can do all of the work of the data center plus more. The data center technology is already obsolete. So why build it? And so I think that it's already apparent to most people who look into it and think about it that this is true. And the only thing that is driving the building of the data centers is that the corporations that basically promised their stockholders that they were going to do this are on the hook to do it. But it makes no sense, and it won't ultimately be a good investment because it's already obsolete coming out of the box.
Okie dokie. The next few questions are long ones, and we don't have time to get into all of that. So you want to call it 4 minutes early, boss?
Okay, well, I'm hopeful that all these things will get resolved peaceably and that we will be back on track with all respects to the bank. But I want you to know that there are numerous actions to be taken, and if it turns out that we can't get Hunter back on track and on board and moving ahead with what we agreed to and what was envisioned as a mission to return the assets and the credit owed to 8 billion people, then we have other options. So don't worry about it. Don't fret. There are many ways to get the mission accomplished, and some of the means and methods are not yet apparent. So just keep your cool. Don't worry over much. Keep focused on what you want, and just look forward to a tremendously good, happy, wonderful resolution to everything that has so far transpired. All right, guys, take some time out, go to your happy place, love your families, do all the things that you want to do that mean a quality of life to you. And we'll see you back here next week. And I will see you at the coordinator call meeting. And you may see me on a special Zoom call yet. If that happens, well, we'll be sure to get it out to everyone. And we will wish you a wonderful week and a very peaceful and happy week ahead. God bless everybody.
Bye-bye.